Welcome in to Sikkim365.com. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhoefer. Today here with Ashley Hodge once again as we continue to dive in and talk about this men's basketball roster. Today, we get to talk about one of my personal favorites, Cincinnati wing Dan Skillings Jr. Transferred into Baylor, was a big get for the staff, kind of one of those recognizable names for Baylor fans because he had so much success against the Bears over the last 2 years. A 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan, a guard forward type, can kind of do a little bit of everything, really. Lots of versatility here. But the biggest thing for me, a proven scorer at the Big 12 level, and a guy who I do think could make some noise this year for the Bears and be kind of I guess for some Baylor fans, a little bit of surprise, because I've noticed it. I feel like the board is pretty split on kind of their thoughts on him and what he could be for this team going into next season.
Yeah, let's talk about the positives first. His nickname's Baylor Dan, and for good reason. He put some of his best performances against Baylor. And so Baylor fans got a firsthand look at what his potential upside is. He has some really good games against Baylor. Some games where he looked like an all Big 12 player for sure. And I think he was all Big 12 honorable mention his last year, not this year, but the year before that. I mean, he was a guy that, was expected to be, an NBA player. And I think he still has that potential. And I think Baylor sold him on, the Jalen Bridges plan that, we can use you in a way that really highlights your strengths. And I think he's going to bring a lot to the table. He's a great defender. He plays with a high motor. This term that we are using in college basketball and basketball in general, stocks. He gets a lot of steals, gets a lot of blocks. He's a freak athlete. 7'2" wingspan. Seems to be, just an infectious personality. If you follow him on TikTok, he's kind of does a lot of TikTok dances with his girlfriend and just has a lot of charisma. Love that. I think offensively he can, kind of be rough at times. His offensive rating, not that efficient. Ends up last year with a 104 offensive rating, 106 the year before. He can go through some cold stretches. He shoots at 30% last year from three. The year before that, he was 29%. So there's enough volume to think, he may not be a 30% or 35% 3-point shooter. You hope he is. Free throw percentage in the 60s. He turns it over a little bit. There's some issues there, but I do think the very high upside. The kind of athlete that you need to compete in the Big 12. Certainly a guy that's very versatile, has been through the Big 12 wars. You know what it's going to translate to against Big 12 competition because you got a really strong, set of data there. So I'm excited about him. I think this is a really big get for the Bears. There were some other teams in the Power 5 land that wanted him badly, and for him to choose Baylor, I think shows a lot of confidence and the staff and the plan that they sold to him as to how they'll use him. And I think he's going to be one of the most important players, certainly. One of the best all-around players. Can he get to that 10 to 12 points a game that he had as a sophomore at Cincinnati? If he does, it's going to mean really big things for the Bears this next season.
So a huge reason for the dip this past year was a knee injury that he sustained in the very first game of the year, and it forced him to miss an entire month. And then he came back and played well for a few games and then just wasn't the same. And I think, you go through a season where Cincinnati wasn't very good. The fans kind of started to turn on him. He missed a month of basketball. He became a guy who they ended up having come off the bench for them towards the end of the year. And I just think so much of that was due to situation. Cincinnati's coach is about to get fired next year. Like, he will not be there. And so I do not believe that is who he is. And I think his first 2 years kind of speak to that. And especially his second year, he was really, really good. The biggest thing for me from a strength area is he played against Big 12 competition a lot and was productive a lot. And that's really something that no one else on this Baylor team has on their resume. His sophomore year is just, it's kind of phenomenal when you actually go back and look at what he did towards the end of the year. He scored in double figures in 18 of Cincinnati's final 23 games, which that only includes conference play, Big 12 tournament, and NIT play. So you're playing against teams that are all very capable and very quality. And he just consistently was scoring points in those games. His first 3 conference games this year, he scored 18 in all 3 of them. I know one was against Arizona and one was against Baylor. I'm forgetting who the third one was, but he scored very well to start that. And then the wheels kind of came off. But I think the biggest things when you look at that, the proven scoring, yes, I know he's not a good 3-point shooter, but his 3-point percentage has gone up every single year since he's been in college. It went from 25.7 to 28.4 to 30 last year. Maybe it goes up to 32. If it goes up to 32, you're super happy with what you're getting from him. And then the other areas that I kind of look at, he gets in the paint a lot. He scores at the rim well. He's very athletic getting to the rim. And then on the defensive side, 3.3 steal rate would have been second behind only VJ Edgecombe last year. 3.1% block rate matches Jeremy Sohan and everyone aside from Norchad Omier and Josh O from last year's team. His 12% rebound percentage is in line with what Jalen Bridges did during his 2 years. And then a 13% assist rate, which definitely shows he's a more willing passer than maybe his numbers indicate. He's actually pretty good in that regard. So I think overall, just a really good team player, a major asset on the defensive side, and a guy who I just think there's tremendous upside and honestly a tremendous floor for what he can do scoring the basketball.
Yeah, it's interesting. Different teams are approaching NIL differently. Last year we talked about this on multiple episodes with these player profiles, but Baylor made a decision to go top heavy, more of an NBA model where you spend 75% of your budget on your top 3 guys. Seems like BYU's doing the same thing. And Rob Wright's one of those top 3 in their opinion. But, Baylor, I think, is making a better decision, more of the Florida type approach where you just, balance the roster with 8, 9, 10 guys and you don't overspend on one player. You have a lot of versatility. You have guys that can, guard multiple positions. Skillings may be the most versatile of all those guys. I think he's a guy that's strong enough to guard a center. He's quick enough to guard a point guard, and he certainly can guard 2 through 4. So he's a guy that just gives you a lot of flexibility on the defensive end. Maybe Tunde is the same way, but he's a freshman. We know Skillings is proven at the Big 12 level. But I like what Baylor's doing from that regard, and having those options to. Just when guys get tired, you can take them out and give them a blow. And if a guy goes down for an injury, let's say a guy gets in an ATV accident and breaks his arm, and is out a couple months, hypothetically, then you would definitely have, the options to, bring guys in that are equal, that, it's not that huge of a loss, where, as last year, if they lost Edgecombe or they lost Norchad, you're cooked, and there's just a lot, more depth this year. And I think that's going to, make for a more consistent season. And, hopefully by the end of the year, just that, the ability to play together, get those extra 7 games in Germany for a good bulk of the roster will pay dividends. And I'm excited to see Skillings in Germany and to really see him, get some connection with Obi Agbem and JJ White, because he's going to need that during the season.
I think that versatility is key, because you could see a situation where if Baylor wants to go all offense to an extent, I mean, if you put Ratai at center, Skillings at the 4, Tunde at the 3, and then whatever you want for the guards, Obi and either Cam Carr or JJ White, I mean, that is, you can do it because you have the length, you have the rebounding to actually make that work. Now, I do have to talk quickly about the weaknesses here. I mean, was last year who he is? The mentality, those type of things, was his sophomore year kind of just a flash in the pan? That's something that is definitely a question. Another concern for me is off the bench. He only had 4 double-figure games in 16 games. When he was the starter, he had 8 double-figure games in 13 games. So My only point there is I don't know how he would react to if he's coming off of the bench. And we've seen that with guys. You look at Kansas last year, they had Rylan Griffin coming off the bench for them, and he had a terrible year. And so you just don't know how guys respond in those kind of situations. And so I'm just curious and a little hesitant on that. The 3-point shooting, the free throw shooting, those are the other two things that come to mind. But I think in general, it's more about who is he? Is he the guy from his junior year, or is he the guy from his sophomore year? How much did that injury affect him? How much more of a ceiling is there? Because if he plays like he did his sophomore year, I mean, he's going to be really, really good for Baylor this season.
Yeah, Cincinnati fans were divided on him. I think they weren't that upset to see him go. Hopefully he has a chip on his shoulder, something to prove. It was a good teammate from what everybody said, but you look at Cincinnati, they were certainly better on defense than they were on offense. Even their top scorers, guys like Jizzle James, Day Thomas, Simus Lucasius, they were not lighting it on fire from an offensive efficiency either. So they were a bit of a mess offensively. I think, going into a system that Scott Drew has, where they've just churned out top 25 offenses like clockwork every year, will do a lot of good things for him, much like it did for Jalen Bridges. So I'm excited to see how he fits in the Baylor system, and should be a great add.
Is your expectation that he's going to be a starter for Baylor?
I think so. I think Obi, Skillings, Ratai, probably Bodo are the four that make the most sense. Tunde who knows, Tunde or Carr. But I mean, Skillings has the experience. He's been through the wars. I think he's, going to be a starter, and he's so versatile that he's, I think he's going to fit somewhere, whether it's a 2 guard, whether it's the 3, whether it's the 4, doesn't matter. He should be one of Baylor's key players.
I 100% agree. I think he'll be a starter for Baylor this upcoming season. That's it for today. We'll be back. We're going to continue just churning right along, talking about these Baylor men's basketball players, all these new additions. But that's it for today. Thanks for listening on Stick365.com.